नमस्कार, सिक्किम क्रोनिकलमा यहाँहरू सबैजनालाई स्वागत छ। आज हामी तपाईँहरूलाई दार्जिलिङमा लिएर आएका छौँ अनि आज हामी ग्याङ्ला निवासमा छौँ र तपाईँले सोचिरहनु भएको छ ग्याङ्ला निवास कसको हो भने म तपाईँलाई जानकारी गराउन चाहन्छु कि 1953मा पहिलोपल्ट विश्वकै सबैभन्दा एकदम द टलेस्ट एन्ड द हाइएस्ट पिक माउन्ट एभरेस्ट चढ्नुहुने तेन्जिङ शेर्पा सर एडमिन हिलेरी सरसँग उहाँले यो सब्मिट गर्नुभएको हो। तेन्जिङ शेर्पा सरको यो निवासस्थान हो र आज हामी अति नै खुसी छौँ अनि यो एपिसोड अति नै विशेष हुनेछ किनभने आज हामीसँग हुनुहुन्छ उहाँको सुपुत्र जामलिङ तेन्जिङ नोर्गे। धेरै कुराकानी गर्नेछौँ अनि अहिले हामी यो जुन इन्टरभ्यू छ यसलाई हामी तेन्जिङ शेर्पा सरको जुन प्राइभेट म्युजियम छ यसमा हामीले सुट गरिरहेका छौँ। फर्स्ट एन्ड फरमोस्ट जामलिङ सर, थ्याङ्क यू सो मच फर डुइङ दिस एन्ड लेटिङ अस एसेस योर प्राइभेट म्युजियम। लेट मी स्टार्ट asking you, because हामीले यहाँ आएर हेऱ्यौँ होइन and we went through this place holds so much of significance when it comes to the world history or maybe the mountaineering को जब कुराकानी गर्दछौँ, what does Gangla means to you exactly?
See, this is my father's residence. Okay, he bought this place after he climbed Mount Everest in 1953. And this is actually an old British bungalow, old British house that belonged to a Bengali poet. So he bought this place, from him, and he moved to this new house after he climbed Everest from Unsung. That's where he was living before that. And today we all were born and raised and grew up over here. And the particular area, the building where you're at right now, is sort of our guest house. For family and friends, and so we've sort of converted this into a private museum, taking most of all of my father's memorabilia and medals and whatever he had post-Everest, and also some of his Everest equipment, and converted it into a private museum, to protect and preserve his legacy.
What could be the specific meaning of Gangla?
Gangla means, it's a snowy pass. Mm-hmm. And Gangla was his family name. Because my father was born in Tibet, and he was born in the village of Gangla, which is the bigger village is known as Kharta Valley, and that's where he was born. So he renamed this place Gangla. Okay. After that.
So not many people knows that his actual name is Namgyal Wangdi. Later, he was named Tenzing Sherpa. Could you take us through exactly what had happened, the circumstances which led to change in the name?
Well, yeah, my father, like I said, he was born in Tibet, in the Kharta Valley, which is, if you're looking from his village, from his house, looking up, you'll see Mount Everest. And you'll see the Unsung face of Everest, which is the east face of Mount Everest. And his parents decided to migrate over to Nepal, cross the Nangpala Pass, and settle in the village called Thame. And so he grew up in Thame, when he was a very, very young boy. And his parents wanted to have my father, to offer him to the monastery to become a monk. Like most families, in our, like the Hindus or Nepalese or, or the Buddhist families, we usually give one of our children, up to do God's work. So his parents wanted to send him to the monastery to be a monk. But when they took him to the Thame monastery, the abbot of Thame monastery, or the Rinpoche, did a divination. And then he basically told my father's parents that I cannot accept your son to be, a monk in this monastery. That he was, he was a reincarnation of a very wealthy man in Tibet, and he was destined to do great things. And besides, he said we need to change his name to Tenzing Norgay, which means the Tenzing is the follower of religion, and Norgay means the fortunate one. And that's why that's when his name was changed from Namgyal Wangdi to Tenzing Norgay.
So we can say that since early days, there was a manifestation from the Rinpoche that your father would in fact make a big name.
Yes, definitely. And there are stories also, and about people, when he used to, growing up in the Thame Valley, he was herding his family's yaks, and that's what he did, in the pastures. And sometimes he'd just lie down, basking in the sun, relaxing. And there are stories about people seeing, like a cobra right behind him, sort of hovering over him and sort of protecting him. And I don't know how far that is true, but maybe it's a myth too.
All right. So then, what was his age when he, left home and he decided to come Darjeeling? Can you tell us?
Yeah, well, Nepal was closed to the outside world until 1950. So no foreigners could enter Nepal until 50. So all the expeditions that went to Mount Everest was going from Tibet, from Lhasa, and then on the north side, they were climbing Everest from the north. And one of the first expeditions was in the 1920s, 21, 24, when Mallory and Irvine, in 1924, they were lost high up on the mountain. And then the Tibetan government, the Dalai Lama's government at that time, they did not give permits to enter into Lhasa. So all the expeditions started from Darjeeling. And it was a gap of almost 10, 11 years. And in 1935, Eric Shipton, one of the greatest mountaineers of those years, explorer and mountaineer, he wanted to do a reconnaissance expedition to, see if it was possible to, go back and climb Everest, because it's been 11 years since the British had not come and Mallory was lost on the mountain. So my father, heard about news that there are, foreigners coming to Darjeeling to hire Sherpas, hire people to go on mountains. And my father had this connection with Mount Everest for his whole life, since he was growing up. So he felt, and so he decided to come, and his parents didn't let him go. So he decided to run away. So he ran away from his home in Thame, walked for almost about 3 weeks, and came to Darjeeling. And so he came here basically to look for a job, to be selected as a Sherpa on a mountain. And he got his first job with Eric Shipton in 1935. So that time they used to walk from Darjeeling, cross into Sikkim, and then cross the border, and then walk on the north side, all the way to the base camp of Mount Everest, which took almost a month to get there.
So, my research says that there were several attempts, almost 6 attempts, before he made it, to the Everest in 1953. So, can you tell us about the first failed, expedition? Do you remember that?
Well, yeah, this was the first expedition with Shipton, with Eric Shipton in 1935. And he had, Eric Shipton was reluctant to choose him. And at that time, the Sherpas were staying in, the British climbers were staying at the Planters Club here in Darjeeling. So they used to hire all the Sherpas, and whoever they needed from the Planters Club. And there's a very nice photograph of my father waiting in line, with his khaki shorts, and the sahibs waiting behind the table and doing interviews. And Shipton had already selected the number of people that he needed. And my father was there last, waiting in line. But my father didn't move from that spot. He just stayed there, determined to get the job.
Oh.
And they also, okay, we don't need any more people, but my father just refused to move. So he stayed there. And all of a sudden, Shipton looked at my father and then saw this, tall guy, and he felt something. Shipton just felt a vibe. And he said, okay, I'm going to hire you. I don't know why, but I'm going to hire you. I like you. There's something about you that I like. So that's when my father got his first job. And then on that expedition, they went up just below the North Col. They got just up below the North Col. And my father, he performed extremely well. He carried double the loads people were carrying, the Sherpas were carrying. He walked twice as fast as anyone else. He'd sometimes go to the camp, drop the supplies off, come back down, help the other Sherpas carry the supplies, go to the camp again, drop. So with this performance, after the expedition, they all had a book. All the Sherpas had a book. It was basically like their resume. And then after the expedition leader would write about the performance, So the next time they went for a job, they'd show the book. So, so that was like a resume.
Okay.
And that was provided by the Himalayan Club. There's a nice book about it. And we still have the book about all the expeditions he went. So he had written, that, this guy, this Sherpa Tenzing was, extraordinary. And that's how he got his following the next jobs. He continued getting jobs. So that was his first expedition. Then in 1936, he went with H.W. Tillman, another British climber. He wanted to come and try to climb Everest from this side. And then 1938, he went with Hugh Rutledge. And then, so on. He went like 3 times with them. And he went once with a mad Frenchman, Earl Denman. And there was like 4 times, and then 5 and 6 was with the Swiss in 52. And in 1950, when Nepal opened its doors to the foreigners, the first visa that was given entry into Nepal, foreigner, was Maurice Herzog. He was a French climber, and he was the first person to climb Mount Annapurna. And so in 1950, when they opened the door, the permit to Mount Everest was given by the Nepalese government to the Swiss in 1952. And in 1951, Eric Shipton came back. Since Nepal was opened, Eric Shipton came back to Nepal and said, all right, I want to see if there's a possibility to climb Everest from the south side. Because till now they've been trying from the north. And by now, Tibet has shut its doors, because of the Chinese invasion is coming to happen. And so Shipton came in 51 to Nepal for the first time. And he was the first foreigner to enter into the Khumbu region, the Everest region from the Nepalese side. And he managed to get through the ice fall. And during that time, he hired Edmund Hillary, and another New Zealand climber and some of his team. And they were the first people to cross the ice fall, just to the tip of the, ice fall they went through. And then he looked through that and said, I think there's a way we can climb this mountain from this side also. Because nobody knew until then. And then by the time he came back and said, there's a way to climb this mountain, let's get the permit, with the British, let's get the permit. The Swiss had already got the permit for 52. So my father went with the Swiss in 1952 twice, once in the spring and once in the fall. And he was, by the Swiss, he was invited not as a Sherpa, hired as a Sherpa, but he was invited to be a member of the team. The same sort of level, respect they'd given him. So my father went with the Swiss, and his climbing partner was Raymond Lambert, a Swiss climber. And at that time in the spring, they were almost about 250 feet, 250 meters below the summit. And they had to turn back because of weather and oxygen problems. And if they had continued, they would have made it to the summit. But they probably would not have made it back alive. So they decided to come back. And then they went back again in the fall, in September, October, to try again. But fall is not a good time to climb. Its success rate is very, very low.
So, the failed attempt of your father, in fact, gives us a very strong message that try until it's you succeed, right? Because, if any other person would have, given up after, attempting so many times. So, what was the age when you realized about your father's achievement, that when you felt like, oh, my father is someone who has, made it, on his own, what was the age?
Well, I think I was probably around 8 or so, 7, 8 years old. I realized who this man was. Because I was in school, I was in boarding school when I was 6 years old, 6, 7 years old. And then just, during our winter holidays, instead of going to, the beach or shopping or, some nice places, we used to go trekking.
All right.
He used to tell us, let's go. And we used to go to Sandakphu. I used to go to West Sikkim, Yoksum and Zongri, up to the HMI base camp areas. And when I was around 8 years old, I went with him, to all the way to HMI base camp up in Chaurikang, up past Zongri. And that's when I, realized that who this man was. And that is also when I realized that I wanted to climb more and more mountains. I loved being in the outdoors, and I wanted to aspire to be just like him. At that age, I wanted to, do this thing. And so that's when I realized that, this man that climbed Mount Everest, he was a very famous man. But he never behaved like a famous man. He was a very simple and humble man all his life.
Always grounded.
Yeah, always grounded, very simple. And one of the greatest things about Hillary, both Hillary and my father, was, these two people, simple human beings. Hillary was a beekeeper from New Zealand. My father was a normal Sherpa from Darjeeling. And they climbed this mountain because they were passionate about what they did. They loved, climbing. They loved exploring. Not only Everest was not only the goal. They explored. My father was the one who explored the entire Himalayan range. No one, I think, in the world has traveled as much as him. All over the Himalayas, from the Sikkim Himalayas to, he also went all the way to Hindu Kush in Afghanistan, Pakistan, all parts of Nepal. And they just loved it, they just enjoyed what they did. And they were true mountaineers, true pioneers. And the bottom line is they were both grounded and simple and humble people. They climbed the mountain, they became heroes, overnight. They climbed the mountain, next they came back down, there were like, millions of people, were encouraged, by what they did. They were, so they became famous, world famous. But it didn't get to the head. At the end of the day, after they climbed the mountain, came back as heroes, they went back to continue to live both their lives as simple human beings. And most important, what happened after the climb was both of them spent the rest of their lives giving back to the community, giving back to the environment, giving back to. And my father spent all his life at the Mountaineering Institute that was set up for him by Nehru, and to train thousands more Tenzings. And so that was the birth of mountaineering in India and around the world.
So, his love for mountain is exceptional because, I'm sure, he has conquered and he has climbed so many mountains all across the world, which it itself speaks in volume about his love for the mountains. We wanted to understand about Mr. Tenzing Sherpa as a person. What was that core value he always lived up to as a son? What do you think, and what are the qualities which you thought should be imbibing from your father?
I think one of the most important lessons I learned from him was discipline. He was a very strict father. He was very strict. Even when he's in the Mountaineering Institute, he was very strict. He wanted to get things done. He wanted to make sure it's done. He did not like to leave loose ends hanging around. He was very particular about what he did. Discipline doesn't mean, and he had no ego. He always taught us that you wash your dishes after you're done. Even though you have servants in the house doing all the stuff, you do it yourself. There's no shame in doing these things. Sweep the floor, basic things. Today you ask somebody to do it, why should I? They think they are below the dignity. There is no such thing as below. Ego problem. There's no such thing as dignity. You tell me, I'll sweep the floor right now. I can wash everything. I don't have an ego. And that's one of the things that he taught us, is to learn to do everything. Don't let the ego get the better of you. Be a simple human being, simple. And that's the way he lived the rest of his life. So when you grow up with a person like that, you tend to, take in those qualities also as well.
Exactly. Sir, I was researching on your father, and I came to know that the summit was done in 29th of May 1953. Yes. And the news was kept under a wrap for at least 2 to 3 days. Mm-hmm. It was only made public on 2nd of June. What was the reason for that?
See, the reason for keeping the summit success a secret until the 2nd of June was that on the 2nd of June, the new queen, Elizabeth II, was getting coronated in London.
Okay.
So they wanted to release the news on the 2nd of June as a gift to as a coronation gift to the queen.
Okay.
So it was kept a secret the whole time. And there were journalists from all over Nepal, around the world, trying to find out what was going on up in Namche Bazaar and up in, the Everest region, trying to get news from people. But they had John Morris, the reporter, who was with them at the time throughout the whole expedition. His job was to send a message to London, decode a message, a secret message that no one can, understand. And I have that on my, with me on the record. And then they basically send that message from Sherpa runner to Namche Bazaar. And from Namche Bazaar through wire, they send the message to Kathmandu, the British Embassy. And the British Embassy sent the message to London. And then only on the 2nd of June, all the detail was
so there was an embargo on the news for 2 to 3 days. Interesting. So while visiting the museum, I also happened to come across this medal given by the Chogyal of Sikkim. I just wanted to understand, because I came to know that your father has been very instrumental in finding some of the trekking routes, right, in Sikkim. Can you highlight more on this?
Well, when my father opened the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute in Darjeeling with the encouragement, and advice from Nehru. Because Nehru told my father he said, now we have to make 1,000 more Tenzings, so let's build your school. And that's when the birth of the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute came. But when the Mountaineering Institute was made, they needed a place to train the students. but there's no glaciers or Himalayas in Darjeeling, and the closest one was in Sikkim, and that also closer than that was Western Sikkim. So he was, he was the pioneer in finding the route from Yoksum, through Zongri and all the way to Chaurikang, up at the HMI base camp, which is known as the HMI base camp today. And they trained at the Ratong Glacier, in that region. And there was a trail there before from Yoksum to Zongri, because the Chogyal used to worship, from Zongri up to Kabur, Black Kabur. Every year he used to go and perform ceremonies to worship the Black Kabur. So there was a trail up there, small trail. But then my father was instrumental in bringing, because they had to bring hundreds of students in a year, to train up there. So he was responsible for, opening the route and, sort of getting the Ratong Glacier area and getting a little more exposure to Sikkim back then. But in the early 70s, he was close to the Chogyal, and so they were close. And my father said, how about, we promote Sikkim? And then the Chogyal also said, all right, yeah, people, bring foreigners into, Sikkim. And that's when he started to bring, foreign groups into Sikkim, and we sort of...
promoting tourism.
Tourism. Basically, it was tourism then. He was bringing foreigners into Sikkim at that time. And Sikkim was very restricted, at that time. Exactly. So permits and stuff, he managed to get those, with the help from the royal family. And so he brought one of the first tourists into Sikkim in the early 70s.
In 1996, you followed the legacy of your father, and you, along with other team, reached on the top of Mount Everest, and you also became the first to shot it in IMAX, right? Mm-hmm. Tell us about this expedition. What was the drive which led you to Everest?
See, I ever since I was 8 years old, I always dreamt of climbing this mountain. Like I said, I wanted to climb Everest. I wanted to be in the outdoors, and I decided at that time that I don't want to be sitting in an office from 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. I don't want an office job. My life should be outdoors, and I ultimately wanted to aspire to climb Everest because I looked up to my father as my greatest role model. He was my hero, and I wanted to become just like him. And so I never left focus. That was when I was 8, and I finally climbed this mountain when I was 31. Almost 20 plus years, but I never left focus. I climbed all my life. I did it when I was living in the U.S., studying, college in the U.S., working there for a few years. I continued doing a lot of ice climbing, rock climbing. I stayed in shape, and so that sort of, I wanted to try to get into an expedition to climb Everest because it's expensive. It's cost a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of money to, join expeditions. But I wrote to a lot of companies to sponsor, and there was, no response from most of them. But I never left focus of my goal to climb this mountain. And then I finally got a call from David Brashears. Mm-hmm. He's a leading mountaineer and a filmmaker. And it was 2 o'clock in the morning, because of the time difference with the U.S. And so he said he wanted me to join as the expedition leader, the climbing leader of this IMAX filming team. And they had, I think the budget was almost $6 million or something. And so I said, definitely, yeah, I want to go because this is the opportunity I'd been waiting for all my life. Mm. And that was when I was selected to be, part of this expedition. And I told David very frankly that, I've never climbed any big, 8,000 meter peaks. He said, don't worry, you're Tenzing's son, so I'm not worried. And so that's how I joined the expedition as the climbing leader. And we made a great movie. I mean, the IMAX movie was thought to be impossible to be made by the film fraternity in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. The directors, producers in Hollywood said it's not possible to carry an IMAX camera. And the climbing fraternity also, said it's impossible to do this thing because you need special cameras, special IMAX camera had to be made. Special film, brittle, because film will break easily, in cold temperatures. We needed special batteries to be made to withstand the minus 40 degrees, minus 50 degrees Celsius temperatures. So a lot of research 2 years of research went into, developing the camera. And then the camera itself was 22 kilos, just the body of the camera. And, one roll of film was almost about 6 kilos, and it was only 90 seconds you got from one roll of film. So it's a lot of work, a lot of dedication.
Lot of
and
challenges.
lot of challenges we had. And we had the A team on the mountain. David Brisher selected the best climbers, diversity of climbers, one of the best climbers also, great alpinists like Araceli Segarra, the Spanish woman, Ed Wiesters, Sumiyo Suzuki from Japan, Ed Wiesters, American climber, and Robert Schauer, the Austrian climber from Austria. He was the assistant cameraman. So to make this possible, and prove the rest of the world wrong, David said, all right, I'm going to gather the team. So we had the dream team, on the mountain that day, that year.
Sir, almost after 43 years, you were exactly in the same spot where your father was there, almost 43 years ago. I just wanted to understand, what was the emotion running through your mind, heart? I mean, how were you feeling when you were on the top of the mountain?
Well, you don't get to think much. When you come back, you sort of realize, you're like... But I remember very clearly that just as soon as I got to the summit, I felt nice sense of accomplishment. When you dream about doing something for a long time, you work hard for an exam, you study really hard, and then finally you get 96%. You feel nice, no?
Did you remember your father there?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I remembered him a lot. I thought about him a lot throughout the whole climb.
Did you thought like how difficult it was, because 96 ma technology alikati bha pani थियो. I mean, it was quite comfortable
big
comparatively to
difference.
1953.
Yes.
I mean, did you sense that challenge, the difficulties which your father went through climbing?
Well, not that much, because I could feel the amount of stress and amount of difficulty they had. I could feel that, because with the equipment we had and the difficulty we were having, I was just imagining myself is, what if we were in their shoes, if we had their boots, the shoes themselves weighed almost like 8 kilos, 9 kilos, and the oxygen weighed about 20 kilos. Nowadays our oxygen bottle, like these ones over here, weigh only 6 kilos. That's my father's oxygen, which weighs almost about 20 kilos, 18 kilos, yeah.
So this is the oxygen cylinder which you carried?
My father carried, yeah. This one we carry, 6 kilos. Big difference. So it made me realize, and it gives you a self of respect to the climbers back, 40 years before we went on this mountain. And you realize, that these people that climbed before us, my father's, back in the 50s and 60s, those climbers who climbed, they were like the true, like hardy men, like really strong and hardy men that actually did this. And they were going into the unknown. They had no idea what was there, because nobody had ever been there before. My father had been there, 6 times. And the last 3 times he was there was from the south side. And he was the only person who knew this mountain better than anyone else in the world. That's one of the reasons the British had to select him as a team member. They invited him as a team member because they needed him, because he knew all the route. He knew, where the crevices, what was, the topography of the mountain. He knew everything about it. So they needed him. He had the most experience in the mountain. And so that's why, at the end, the British actually wanted to send 2 of their British climbers on the summit first. Because it's a British expedition, they needed British subjects, But Tom Bordillon and Charles Wiley were the 2 climbers they wanted to send. But they turned back from the South Summit because they had a little trouble with the oxygen cylinders and they were totally exhausted. And then when they couldn't make it, it was coming towards the end of the season. Almost towards the end of May, and the monsoons were moving in. And then John Hunt, the leader, had no choice but to send Hillary and my father, because they were the next best, And my father and Hillary were actually the best set of climbers on the mountain. But they had to send the 2 British, to make sure that they were the ones who reached the summit. Since they didn't reach, to make the expedition successful, they had to send Hillary and my father, and both of them are not British subjects.
Exactly. Let me read one of your statement which you had given in one of the medias. The son of Sherpa Tenzing believes Everest has been ruined by overnight mountaineers and is calling for change to save his father's legacy. It's a very strong, statement, and holds emotionally a very strong value when we see how the mountain, especially the Everest, is getting exploited, right? What is your point of view? What is the context you want to highlight?
Well, what I want to say with this is, in today's world, I'm sure everyone You see in the news, you see long lines of climbers going on. 350 people in one day trying to climb, and they've climbed. 350 people have climbed this mountain in one single day. Long, long queues, long lines. There are people. I'm not saying everyone, but majority of the climbers that are climbing have no experience in climbing. They've never climbed a mountain in their life before. If you're in good physical condition, you have enough. You have enough chance to get to the summit of this mountain also. So it is available, and with the technology, with the services that you get with the Sherpas today, and with more knowledge about the mountain, it's become easier to climb these mountains. I mean, of course, your chances of survival is still 50-50, because if an avalanche comes and blows you off, that's it. You don't control nature, you don't control at all. Through the icefall, if you're walking through the icefall and one of the serac collapses or an avalanche comes down, you're finished. Just last year, one of the first accidents that happened on Everest was when a serac fell down, in the icefall, and killed 3 Sherpas, and they couldn't find the bodies at all after that. And 2 of the Sherpas were my first cousins. So I've lost a lot of relatives on the mountain, even though we have almost about 16 relatives of mine that have climbed Mount Everest, with over maybe about 120 ascents total. And so it's unpredictable.
I think the photograph taken by this mountaineer Nirmal Purja had created lots of, stir when it comes to how Mount Everest is especially getting exploited by the overnight, mountaineers, and that long queue of traffic jam just reaching before Everest had a very strong message. I just want to ask you, you have been very vocal when it comes in the waste management, especially in the base camp or en route Mount Everest. Tell us, you also took up this expedition, with a team to clean up the junks, Tell us about this.
Well, I've stopped climbing big mountains. I still continue to climb smaller peaks, but I'm more involved nowadays, with the environment. As much as possible, I want to bring awareness of the environment, and global warming. People talk about global warming, but you can see global warming is very prevalent today. You go to Sikkim, that's my base camp. You see the Ratong Glacier. Before, the Ratong Glacier was just next to the base camp. You walk about 30 minutes, you're there. Now you have to walk 2 hours to get to the glacier. So glaciers have receded. Everest Base Camp, Everest Base Camp is almost 50 feet lower than what it was before, 60, 70 years ago. The glaciers are all receding. There's more movements in the icefall. There's more avalanches. Everything is warming up. And so our issue right now is, wherever humans go, they leave something behind. They leave trash. And one of the biggest things they leave is trash. Like we say, you just leave your footprints, and come back. But they leave trash everywhere. And not only Mount Everest, the south col of Mount Everest, which is at 26,000 feet, known as a death zone, because there's only 1/3 of the oxygen up there. So that's the highest junkyard in the world. There's rubbish, of all kinds, from tents, oxygen bottles, and, by now there's several dead bodies also, scattered around the area. And so we're making an effort to bring things back.
So what need to be done?
Well, see, the Nepalese government has to make strict rules. I mean, even though they have rules for people to bring back the rubbish, each person should bring back only at least about 8 to 10 kilos. I think they say something like that. I'm not sure. But it should be your responsibility as a climber to bring your rubbish down. What you take up, you should bring it back down. But the government also, you have to leave a deposit, of $5,000 or something like that, as a rubbish deposit. If you don't bring your rubbish, then you don't get that money. But people who are paying $100,000, $60,000 for an expedition, they don't care about $5,000. They'll say, I don't want my money, I'll just leave my trash there and come back. So that is the attitude. And that is because there are too many climbers up there, There's almost like this year 420 permits were issued. So that means if there are 420 permits, means there's for each climber there's about 1.5, 2 Sherpas. So you have about 900 people, 900 to 1,200 people climbing this mountain. So imagine the number of waste generated. And besides, the waste being left, human waste. number of human waste being left at Camp 2. Base camp is okay right now because in base camp the toilets have drums. So drums, once they fill up, they're taken out to in the Gorakshap and then they're dumped out over there. But in Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4, there's lots of waste up there. And this is all going to trickle down. The glacier is spitting everything out. So it's all going to trickle down and come back to base camp one day. Even dead bodies that are lying up higher up on the mountain, if you leave them there, they will come out to base camp sooner or later. I've seen bodies at base camp, come out after from the 1970s. They've come out. Helicopters that crashed at Camp 1 in 1975 is now at base camp. Everything, being pushed out by the glacier, yeah.
I want to talk very important, aspect and topic, and this is the unsung heroes. Basically, the Sherpas. Even we as a media have been failed to validate the contribution which Sherpas make, through, while climbing Mount Everest. They go unnoticed. Do you think much has been done for them? And we have been really vocal when it comes to their welfare. Tell us what can be done and how do you see the condition? Because I think only getting money is not enough, right?
No, see, for the Sherpas, it's a job, it's their livelihood. If they join an expedition for Everest, 2 months of their life goes on the mountain. And the amount of money they get paid for the 2 months is what they'd make, take them maybe a year to make if they went as a trekking guide or if they went, did some farming or did some other business. So it's lucrative, according to their standards. Mm-hmm. But according to the world standard, the pay that they salary and the pay that they get is minimum, it's nothing. And 2014, after the avalanche killed 18 Sherpas in the icefall, there was a big protest at base camp and the Sherpas boycotted the climb. So there were no expeditions because they've no Sherpas means no expedition. No one will, foreigners, nobody will go on the mountain if the Sherpas are not there because they carry all the supplies, they fix all the lines, they do everything. They lay down the sleeping bag for people, they bring food to the tent, they do everything now. So without them, they are the backbone of mountaineering, in the Himalayas. 99% of expedition would not be successful without the help and support of the Sherpas. And we've been fighting for better pay, better insurance. The insurance they get today is maybe like 10 to 12 lakhs, 15 lakhs maybe, Nepali rupees, which is like 10 lakh IC, which is nothing.
It's not
if a Sherpa dies, they're left with 2 children, the wife, the widows, the 2 children, small kids, they're not going to survive long with 10 lakh rupees, And so we're trying to bring that insurance level up. We're trying to meet with all the, all the climbing operators.
Is there an organization to work on this?
Well, no, they have just the Everest, expedition, committee, associations and stuff. But look, I'll tell you, at the end of the day, everyone is looking out for their own interest. And the Sherpas, at the end of the day, also they're like there's not much you can do. So what I would like to do is, when I'm in Nepal, I've been sort of pushing the message to different friends and different people that I know to try to bring this up within the government and then have a concrete like a minimum salary because everyone's undercutting each other. Because today what Mount Everest, Manasulu, all these mountains, K2, you see the number of people climbing K2 is increased 10 times than it was like 5 years ago. So I'm trying to propagate this and send the message to the Sherpa communities that, okay, let's get together and let's form a base, where you're not undercut. Because now what happens is when there are 40 expedition operators, you're looking for a job, they're undercutting each other. They say, I'll pay you this much. You say, no, I'll pay you, yeah, I'll give you a little bit less, you come with me. And, and they're desperate for work. So we want to stop that. And in order to stop that, we have to work together. Otherwise, it's not possible.
You also penned a book, Touching My Father's Soul, and in this book you have talked about, a journey especially and your connotation and a connection which you had with your father, right? And I think this is one of the best tributes you have given to your father by penning this book for the posterity. There's a movie coming up based on your father's, life story, a biopic. Can you slightly highlight, what is the present status of that?
Well, this film is a biopic about my father, which was we've been talking with several producers and several companies, and we actually started with Netflix, who was on board before, and then they sort of backed out for some reason, and then we were working with the Obama Productions, and then it went to Disney. And then Disney also put it in the back burner, and then finally this time they brought it up in the cans, and during that, yeah, and then Apple has sort of taken the license to make this film with Jennifer Peterham, who's going to direct this film. And so the casting for this film was going on many years ago. It started in Kathmandu. There's all over India, in the U.S., in New York, in Europe. They're looking for, the casting directors are going around casting people. And they have found Tom Hiddleston, the actor who acts in Thor, and Willem Dafoe also will be there. He's going to take John Hunt's role. Tom Hiddleston will take Edmund Hillary's role, but they're still looking for a role to take from after my father. And so it's still going on. And hopefully the production will start maybe by the end of this year or early next spring.
Really good. We are very excited. You have been a motivational speaker and you travel across, globe, motivating students, the young minds. And you've often talked about overcoming the Mount Everest of your life. What is that? What exactly you are trying to touch?
Well, what I say to people that is everyone has their own Everest to climb. Whereas passing 4th to 5th grade or passing your ICSE exams or, trying to get a WBS job, government service, or trying to go and do a basic mountaineering course and completing the course with a grade A, that is you have your Everest. And you don't have one Everest, you have many, many Everests all the time. You finish your class 12 exam, that is your first Everest. Then you college, so every time there's a Everest to climb. So everyone has their own Everest to climb. And you need to climb that mountain with dedication. You have to be passionate about it. And especially when I talk to people in the different professions, I think the most important thing in life is to enjoy what you do. If you're an accountant and it pays you good money, but you don't enjoy it, you shouldn't be there. Get out. Do something you like, and ultimately, it'll pay for itself.
So do you feel like you carry that baggage of your father's legacy and it makes really difficult for you, or people have many expectations? If yes, then how do you deal with it?
No, I never felt I carried the baggage of my father. My father also, when I was young, when I was 18, and I wanted to climb Everest that time. And I told my father I wanted to be the youngest to climb. He said no. He said, he climbed so that we wouldn't have to. He said he climbed so that he can give us a better education so we can continue our lives in some other careers rather than climbing, because climbing was dangerous. So that is one of the reasons. But I decided to continue, to pursue my dreams. My siblings don't climb. None of them are mountaineers or climbers.
You are 6 siblings, right?
No, 4 of us, yeah.
Four, okay.
Four siblings. And they all, they enjoy trekking and doing stuff, but not into mountaineering. And I love being out there. I love the mountains. I love climbing. I love walking, so I enjoy what I do. I don't care about the money or anything. Life is good if you're enjoying what you're doing. So in the same way, I tell people in different professions, make sure you enjoy what you do. If you don't, get out. It's not worth it.
So it was so pleasure talking with you, and thank you so much for inspiring us and doing this. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me, and welcome to Khangla.
There are so many things to still discuss, but due to time constraint, we are not able to include that. But in future, we look forward to talk on many unspoken aspects of Tenzing sir's life.
Sure, yeah,
thank you so much. Thank you.
Anytime.
So thank you so much for watching. अनि तपाईहरुको केही सुझाव कमेन्ट्स छ भने you can be very open to make a comments in the comment box below. हाम्रो उद्देश्य नै यस्तै प्रकारले तपाईहरुलाई प्रोत्साहन गर्नु हो, and to introduce you with this such inspiring personalities who motivates you. Thank you so much for watching with Ashish Gurung and Pranam. This is Nirwal saying goodbye, and thanks for watching Sikkim Chronicle.